Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is January 7, 2015. When we're not on air, you could always look at our information online at www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you'd like to get your information via the phone line, you can call us at 1-800-472-0391 and punch in a code for your area. Now, looking at the highlights of the day today, it's been a very active weather pattern for this week, and the weather is shifting from the southeast, where they experienced lots of snow yesterday, to the south central, southwest, and interior areas. The area highlighted in yellow across the southwest up through the south central is for freezing rain advisories that are out from this evening through the day on Thursday for much of the locations, as we have freezing rain possibilities stretched all across the southern areas. A red area here near Valdez is for the Thompson Pass. There's a blizzard warning out as the next storm system comes rolling through here. And then we also have wind advisories across the south central, Tanana Flats area, and also just to the north across the upper Koyukuk. They still have a high wind warning that's in effect in those areas through midnight tonight. Now, just taking a closer look across the north again, just the central interior areas, wind advisories through the Tanana Flats, and the wind warning across the just north in the upper Koyukuk Valley. Now, I wanted to put up this map just to show you the troublesome areas. The freezing precip is going to be across the western areas of the Prince William Sound, and there's going to be a very sharp rain line here with the freezing rain across the Cook Inlet areas and back towards the southwest. So just a clear depiction as we go through the show and we show you the maps. There's going to be fronts on there in just a moment, and just to show you Juneau, they're kind of out of the clear of the storms yesterday. Here's the storm systems looking out towards the west. We have two very full comma clouds just sitting to the south of the Aleutian chain. But primarily we're concerned with what's coming over towards the eastern Bering. You can see there's this very cold air mass that's seeping down behind a low pressure system that you can just barely see turning counterclockwise on the screen right here. So I'll put that into motion one more time, and you can see that there's a little bit lighter gray clouds here, and that's just because we had warmer temperatures butted up against this really cold air mass that's sitting across the central areas of the Bering. Now, closer to home for all of you concerned, here's this cold low pressure sitting across the eastern Bering with the cold temperatures wrapping around all the way just about to the Alaska Peninsula, and there's a transition to a warmer air mass that's flowing up from the eastern Pacific areas, streaming much clouds towards the south central areas, and this is going to be the area of concern as we have this next low pressure system that's going to be pushing to the north. So putting this into motion, you can see this low pressure system is bringing a large plume of clouds up towards the northern Gulf areas and across the southwestern areas. Across the southeast, there partly cloudy skies today, but pretty much the rain and snow event has come to an end from yesterday, and then we have mainly partly cloudy skies across the northern tier of the state. Putting that into motion one more time, and you can watch the circulation across the eastern Bering and the North Pacific pluming that moisture. Looking at today's map, here's the low pressure at the surface, a 992 millibar low with an extension of a warm front that's just up to the Kenai, the western areas of the Gulf of Alaska along the Kenai, with temperatures reporting up to 40 degrees at the southern tip of the Kenai and Kodiak Island. Here across the southeast yesterday, we had snow amounts up to 4 to 8 inches across Juneau and further north and across Hoonah. And then just to the south near Ketchikan, they had heavy rain yesterday, up to 2.37 inches. Across the interior areas, they experienced wind with this high pressure building over western Canada and low pressure just sitting across the eastern Bering and coming up towards Kodiak Island. This is causing this gradient to be squeezed, so very strong winds to the north. However, the northern tier of the state rather quiet for this time. Northwest saw some patchy fog this afternoon, and high pressure just sitting off the coast, it has kept things kind of quiet there. Snow across the Bristol Bay area and Kuskokwim Delta was observed this afternoon, with some rain reported in the early morning hours after having a short-lived event of freezing rain at King Salmon. They warmed up very quickly with this warm air mass just nudging up towards the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Now looking across the Bering, we had a system low pressure across the western Bering, and that's diminishing, and it's a mix of freezing rain out there. However, the main concern is going to be the focus on these two low pressures as we head into tonight's forecast. This warm air mass that's lodged right up against the northern Gulf is going to be coming along a southerly flow and just pulling up across the south central and southwestern areas. So be on the lookout for the morning commute tomorrow. Could be quite hazardous with freezing rain. The lightest amounts will be observed to the north of the Kenai, with the heaviest amounts across the Kenai, possibly adding up to 0.2 of an inch. Also across the village areas of the southwest, they can see up to 0.2 of an inch of freezing rain as well. So very cold air mass still at the surface. This warm air mass is going to come racing across the state, so we're going to warm aloft much faster. So be on the lookout for your morning commute. Take time to slow down. Across the southeast, isolated chances for rain to the south with snow across the interior areas. Just some light snow showers lingering behind the system, and the upper level wave will bring some precipitation possibly around midnight tonight to 3 a.m., expecting around the Kenai area to see freezing precip. And then as we head into the early morning hours between 5 and 6 a.m., chances will increase across the rest of south central and through the day tomorrow as this warm front stays kind of stalled along the Gulf waters, and this other low pressure system staying in the eastern Bering, causing these conditions to continue through your day on Thursday. Otherwise, winds will be on the increase across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, with high pressure just being squeezed a bit along the northern coast there. And then across the south, we'll still continue to have winds across the southeast, with this tighter gradient staying all the way just about through the southern interior areas, and gusty winds all across the Alaska Peninsula, the western Gulf, and back towards the eastern areas of the Bering. So change of wind direction around these two low pressure systems, and then a little bit quieter across the western areas of the Bering as we head through the Thursday and Friday. And then the systems will be on the decline on Friday, just showery conditions, possible longer freezing precip in the areas of the Kuskokwim Delta and Valley as they warm up. They're very slow to warm up. So looking at your temperatures for today, we saw temperatures in the 40s across Kodiak Island, warmest across the southeast with a net coming in at 48 degrees, and then across the coastal areas mainly in the lower 20s, and then a quick increase to the 30s across the eastern Kenai. Across the interior, saw temperatures ranging from 10 degrees to -36 over at Chicken, and across the north, below zero temperatures. Continue Seward Peninsula climbing into the mid-teens, and across the southwest, they saw the mid-teens with a quick rise of temperatures as you headed out towards the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Bering in the lower 30s, and the rest of the Aleutians were mainly in the mid to upper 30s. As we look at your forecast for tonight, mainly in the 30s for the Aleutian chain and Bering locations, with a quick rise in temperatures across the western Bearing here, we're going to continue to see those temperatures steady at 40 and in the 30s and 40s across the southeast. Across the inland areas, still well below zero temperatures, and along the north to northwestern coastal areas and back towards the southwest, they're going to be in the lower teens. For tomorrow, that's when you're really going to see the increase of temperatures across south central and the southwest, with temperatures rising into the upper 20s to the mid 30s. And then Kodiak will still be in the 40s, and the southeast will climb into the mid 30s to lower 40s. And then an overall warming trend for the northern tier of the state, finally up to near 0 degrees even along the northern coast there. Across the Bering, still steady with temperatures reaching into the mid 30s again for your tomorrow high temperatures. Looking at flying weather, MVFR conditions across the Gulf of Alaska and the eastern Bering and the southwest. IFR conditions across the low pressure systems, bringing that freezing rain condition for tomorrow. Taking a look at the passes, Anaktuvuk will be MVFR going to VFR in the afternoon, and then same thing for Adigan, MVFR to VFR. And we have Lake Clark and Merrill Pass at IFR for tomorrow, and Rainy Pass IFR. Looking at windy, they should stay VFR for much of the day, possibly seeing MVFR late in the day. Isabel will be VFR and going to MVFR, and then we'll have Mantastico VFR all day, and Tanita will be MVFR condition. Portage, IFR conditions, Chilkoot and White Pass, they could see a brief IFR condition, MVFR, but mostly clear actually during the day, later part of the day for tomorrow. Here's the freezing levels across the southeast and hugging the northern coastal areas into the south, with the much warmer temperatures coming in tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet across the Seward Peninsula, up to 10,000 across the southern areas of the Gulf. The freezing levels just around the central areas of the Bering, with 2,000 foot from the Alaska Peninsula, and then increasing towards the Gulf. Looking at your icing for tomorrow, it should be concerned mainly across a low pressure system here, with below 8,000 feet across the eastern Bering and the southwest, and below 10,000 feet as you move across the Gulf towards the southeast. Looking at your jet stream, mainly a westerly flow, but highly amplified over the state, you can see, with the strongest flow along the northern tier. And then looking at the 9,000 foot winds, here's the two low pressure systems with the strongest winds pulling that warm air across towards the southwest between 35 and 50 knots. Strongest winds are on the east side of these systems. Lighter winds across the Bering around 20 knots for tomorrow. Your 3,000 foot winds are very similar to your 9,000 feet, with the strongest winds across much of the southwest and towards the Kenai between 40 and 50 knots. Southerly flow all across the state, and across the southeast a little bit lighter flow inland, but right off into the eastern Gulf between 40 and 50 knots. Looking at your turbulence tomorrow, mainly between 6,000 to 8,000 feet across the Gulf and the southern areas of Alaska, and below 1,000 feet, below 5,000 feet as you head towards the north. In just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Weather balloons here at Fairbanks International Airport are released by the Weather Service twice a day, and the timing of those releases are such that they are coordinated with all the other releases around the world. And that data then, which provides a vertical profile of temperature and relative humidity and pressure in the atmosphere, is then integrated into the forecast models run by the Weather Service.
How can you forecast the temperatures when an inversion is present? It is a difficult puzzle. In Fairbanks, often the weather forecast says today, clear skies, high temperatures from 20 below to 10 above, coldest in the valley and mildest in the hills. A 30-degree range. This is not uncommon in the interior winter. It's a difficult puzzle to try to put very precise numbers. We need a broad range because within that shallow layer, you go from such cold temperatures to such warm temperatures. That's just the way it is here in the inhabited elevations of interior Alaska. Well, anything you want to forecast, including a temperature inversion, has to be studied. You have to learn how the inversion works in order to forecast its future behavior. And part of learning how it works involves gathering data. And every day out at the Fairbanks International Airport, a weather balloon is launched. On the end of the balloon is a thermometer, up it goes, and we get the vertical profile of temperature in the atmosphere. And that's real good data. You can see the inversion with that. Problem is, the weather balloon only goes up twice a day. And for forecasting, detecting and forecasting the jet stream, which operates on broad spatial and temporal scales, twice a day is for most purposes adequate. However, down here in this fine spatial scale right in urban Fairbanks, we need more than twice a day to really understand the inversion, especially its formation and its dissipation.
So the weather balloons that are released at Fairbanks International are timed with all those other global releases, and they are not actually at times which are very dynamically active here in Fairbanks, which is another reason that we're interested in doing this experiment with an aircraft and also additional weather balloon releases to sample some of those more dynamically active times of the day.
Basically, in preparing the sondes, you have to take the sonde out of the package, prepare the sensors, and then you'll fill up the weather balloon, then need to calibrate the instrument inside. So that's the most important part of balloon preparation. So when we're calibrating the instrument, we make sure that the temperature of the sensor is realistic with the temperature either of the room or outside, wherever the sonde is being calibrated, as well as pressure, making sure that's at our level, and also the relative humidity, that looks realistic. We use these weather balloons that when they're filled up with helium, they're approximately 6 feet wide. And by the time that they reach the top of the atmosphere where the balloon pops, they're about 20 feet wide. So they're huge. It's hard to even imagine. After we get clearance from the FAA, we'll go outside, take the radio sonde, attach it to the balloon, and then make sure there aren't any planes going by just in case, and let her go. And the computer inside actually picks up the signal automatically. It'll tell you exactly when the balloon was launched, and the data will come processing in from there. After we launch the balloon, I'll go back inside the building and to make sure that the data that's coming in on the computer looks realistic, making sure the pressure decreases with height, the relative humidities look realistic, and in my cases, looking at temperature inversion, that the temperature is increasing with height. Typically in the atmosphere, we see temperature decreasing with height, but in these special cases, that's what I'm looking for. And then I can watch as the temperature progresses vertically into the atmosphere as that sensor's rising, and I can see where the top of the inversion layer is. So the National Weather Service currently launches weather balloons twice a day, but I wanted to launch weather balloons more frequently than that to see what was happening between those launches. So I wanted to take a look at what's happening between that 4 p.m. launch and that 4 a.m. launch, and then what's happening between the 4 a.m. and the 4 p.m. So I launched these weather balloons every 2 to 3 hours to gain a better temporal resolution of what's going on in the atmosphere.
Our research asked the question, what will surface-based temperature inversions look like in Alaska over the next 100 years? And the primary tool for studying future projections are global climate models. In fact, they're the only tool. But they're not perfect for answering our question because we're interested in information over a city landscape scale, which is a few miles, 5 miles, 10 miles. Global climate models provide information on a 100-mile scale. So we need to get that information from this coarse scale and downscale it to a higher resolution so it's useful for us. And the way we do that is we take climate information from the global climate model and we feed it into our regional model, which has a domain over Alaska at a resolution of, say, a few miles instead of hundreds of miles. And the large-scale climate comes from these global climate models, and then we run our simulation over Alaska. We have done regional downscaling simulations for 20 years in the 20th century, from 1979 to 1999. We've done 10 years from 2010 to 2019. and then from 2050 to 2059, and 2090 to 2099. So with the regional model, we've taken these 4 slices over time, fed by the global climate model. And what we find, first of all, in the 20th century simulation is that the regional model does a much better job of simulating the vertical surface-based temperature inversions over Fairbanks and the other cities in Alaska. And as we go through the 21st century, those 3 other slices, as the global climate warms, we find that the temperature inversions in the lowest layer don't really change in strength. The strength stays the same, but the whole profile gets warmer. So this study provides a first look at what would be happening to temperature inversions in the future. We need to ask other questions like, how will this frequency change? Will they occur as often? Will the season be much shorter? There's a variety of other questions we need to ask to develop a better picture for how temperature inversions will change in the future. And our first cut answer that we have suggests that we'll still have to worry about the same sort of air quality issues because in the near surface, the strength of the inversion will be about the same.
All right, across the next couple of days, most of the state is going to be experiencing those temperature inversions as that warm air mass comes in across that cold dome at the surface. Now, taking a look at your ice edge, we'll see the ice continuing to recede at this point across the Cook Inlet, and be cautious across the western coastal areas as those warm temperatures come through. That ice along the coast will become unstable. So be careful if you're traveling along those areas. Now taking a look at your southeastern forecast for Thursday, expect some gusty small craft advisory winds out of the south and east for most of the day tomorrow. Higher gusts across the eastern Gulf areas. Across the inner channel, some northerly winds will be strongest with gales across the northern Lynn Canal. Seas across the inside channels will be 5 to 8 feet with the outside waters between 10 and 13 feet. Looking at your Friday forecast, the winds will be on the decline with south to east winds mostly across the outer waters, and then across the inner channels a north wind with small craft across the Lynn Canal at 25 knots there, with seas between 4 and 5 feet across the inner channels, and then the outside waters will see 9 to 10 feet across the western Gulf, which will be of great concern tomorrow. Not great boating conditions with gale warning across most of the area out of the east to northeast direction, with higher gusts and freezing spray across the northern areas of the inlet there. So as we head into your day on Friday, we'll be on the decrease on the backside of this system. We'll be weakening. So we'll see small crafts near the Barren Islands, and winds will primarily be out of the east direction with south direction near Kodiak Island. Okay, as looking at your Thursday forecast, easterly direction for tomorrow across much of the Alaska Peninsula with a change of direction with the other low pressure system, with a southwesterly direction just near the Cold Bay area with possible gustier winds. Looking at your seas here, 6 to 9 feet on Thursday and 11 to 16 feet across the Pacific side. Looking at your Friday forecast, winds on the lighter side, 10 to 15 knots, mainly out of the southwesterly direction. Seas between 3 and 6 feet across the Bristol Bay areas and Bering, and 9 to 10 feet across the Pacific. Now looking at your Thursday forecast for the Aleutians, not so bad with some small crafts with winds mainly out of the north direction, and out towards the western Aleutians you'll see a easterly wind component there. Seas on this day will be between 6 to 10 feet across the Bering, and then North Pacific side will see 8 to 10 feet. Looking at your Friday forecast, lighter winds across most of the area, small craft towards Shimia out of the east direction, lighter and variable across the central and eastern Aleutians. Looking at your western coastal areas and the northern Bering, winds will be quite gusty for your forecast tomorrow, and freezing spray issues where the seas are open seas and along the ice edge. Should see a northeasterly flow for the most part between 25 to 35 knots. And then as we head to your day on Friday, small craft across the northern areas with an easterly direction, except as you head towards the Pribilofs out of the southwesterly direction. And seas here on this day will be between 5 and 10 feet. And looking at your Arctic coastal areas, very gusty conditions across the northeastern Beaufort seacoast, mainly just off the coast, however, and then across towards the Kotzebue Sound, all easterly wind directions between 15 and 25 knots. On Friday, the strongest winds will be across the eastern Beaufort seacoast, with winds lighter across the northwestern coast down to the Kotzebue Sound, north to northeast direction. And then taking a look at your forecast again tonight, freezing rain across the southwest starting this evening, with a changeover possibly to snow across still snow across most of the southwest, a slow changeover to the freezing rain here. The overnight hours will have that warm air rushing in across the south, bringing the freezing rain possibilities first the Kenai just after midnight, and then into the rest of the south central areas by the morning commute. And then as we head through the day on Thursday, continued problems with freezing rain across much of south central. Southeast will be a little bit quieter, however, the winds will be stronger along the Gulf waters. Central interior shouldn't be in much of the precipitation, however, they will hang on to a little bit of a gusty wind component. Gusty winds across the northeastern Beaufort seacoast, a little bit quieter across the northwest. And then low pressure will continue to linger in the eastern part of the Bering through your Friday forecast, bringing some snow across the Kuskokwim Delta areas, and everything will be on the winding down on Friday.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.